Tonight on the Your Life Matters Show podcast.
A thought that if I get rid, like anything I get rid of is taking a part of me with it,
Me away,
you
right?
know? And so it's almost like I'm connected to all of these things and I need all of them to feel secure. And if any of them aren't around, whether I need them or not, I'm going to be uncomfortable, you know?
Behind every struggle, there's a story, and every story deserves to be heard. This is the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Your hosts are Steve Hodgson and licensed psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Imagine, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You wake up to the sound of smoke alarms. Your home is on fire. You have just 30 seconds. Your family is already outside. Your pets are safe. You can save only one possession. Just one. Well? Pictures. Medals. Letters? Favorite. Teddy bear? Your grandmother's quilt. Or the watch your father had. On every day. Why that item? Because it isn't just an object. It's a memory. A connection. A piece of your life. Now, imagine that same feeling, not for one treasured possession, but for hundreds. Maybe thousands. Imagine believing every object has meaning. Every receipt. Every magazine. Every article of clothing. Every box. Every keepsake. Imagine the overwhelming anxiety of being asked to throw any of it away. To someone else, it may look like clutter. To the person living with it, it can feel like losing a piece of themselves. Today, we're talking about a mental health condition that millions of people struggle with, yet few truly understand. It isn't about being lazy. It isn't about being messy. It isn't about refusing to clean. It's about something much deeper. Today, we're looking beyond the clutter to understand the person. Welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Here are your hosts.
Well, howdy, and welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hodgson. I'm here along with my co-host, a man who's helped thousands of people organize their thoughts, but still admits his garage could use a little therapy. Indiana licensed psychotherapist, Dr. Eric L. Davis. Dr. Davis, I joke about garage could need therapy. You should see mine, okay?
My garage is dirty. It could use some cleaning.
Well, yesterday, I got tired of this box. My wife had a box of pictures. We used to have canvas pictures on the wall of the kids and grandkids, and she wanted to change everything. So we put them in a box to give to my daughter. Now, my daughter's not going to be here to next year, some point, okay? And I got tired of moving this big box because these are like 20 by 30 photos around the garage. So I said, I'm going to mail these and see how we should mail them. So I had duct tape. I couldn't find regular tape. Duct tape the box. And I had another little package to mail out. And I go to the post office yesterday. $96 to mail that. First,
Wow.
I mean, I stood there and swallowed. It's like
That's crazy.
$96 to mail that first class from the post office. It's like unbelievable. You know, I used to work for the post office, but that's ridiculous.
That's a lot.
Rates. But you know what? I paid it because I was taking the box back home with me. You know, right now it's been sitting on top of my dryer. Every time I want to put clothes or a basket, I got to move the box and everything. And when I told my wife, of course, she went off on it. $96. It's like, hey, you told me not to put it in the attic. Where are we going to put it? You know, it's not staying in the garage. So anyway, I think we have a good show tonight, another one of those educational shows. And before we get into it, because I have an important question to start, you know, I want you to imagine that what we're going to watch now could be happening in a home somewhere out there in cyberspace. Confused? Watch this.
You got awfully quiet.
That's amazing. You know, I guess I never thought someone on a podcast would describe exactly how I've been feeling.
You don't have to keep carrying this by yourself.
I know that it's true. but I just don't want people thinking I'm weak.
Asking for help doesn't make you weak. It takes courage.
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Start right here at home. Waypost Counseling offers secure online counseling. No waiting room. No long drive. Just someone who's ready to listen.
Every day, someone decides to stop pretending they're okay. At Waypost Counseling, licensed therapists help people facing anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, relationship challenges, addiction, gambling disorder, and many of life's most difficult transitions. Through secure online appointments, compassionate care is available from wherever you feel most comfortable, even your own home. If today's episode felt familiar, maybe it wasn't just something to watch. Maybe it was the sign you've been waiting for. But remember, you have to make the first call.
Okay, so I promised I was going to ask you a question. Okay, so with that, we're going to start off the episode. Now, if your house caught fire and you had 30 seconds just to save one possession, now we're not talking about a person, a pet, your child, just one possession, what would you take? Think about that one, okay, and be specific when you're thinking about that. Now, I want you to imagine that feeling that you're feeling about a lot of those objects for thousands of objects. See, and that's where our conversation begins. See, when most people hear the word hoarding disorder, they immediately picture homes overflowing with boxes, newspapers, clothing, or belongings stacked from floor to ceiling. We've seen the TV show Hoarding, which features extreme cases. And it's easy to assume the problem is simply that someone refuses to throw things away.
But hoarding disorder is far more complex than clutter. It's a recognized mental health condition that often involves overwhelming anxiety, emotional attachment to possessions, difficulty making decisions, and sometimes trauma or loss. For many individuals, getting rid of an item can feel emotionally devastating.
So today we're going to go beyond what you see on TV. We're going to explore what hoarding disorder really is, how it affects individuals and families, and perhaps most importantly, why compassion is far more helpful than judgment.
If you've ever wondered why someone can't just clean up, or if you or someone you love struggles with letting go of possessions, this conversation may help you see the disorder in a different light.
Yes, that really is, because we'll get into it. Let me just wait. We'll get into it. So let's start. Okay, as always, let's start with the basics. What
Right.
exactly is hoarding disorder, and how is it different from simply being messy or disorganized?
So, hoarding disorder is an actual mental health, behavioral health condition in which a person has persistent difficulty getting rid, parting with possessions. The key is regardless of their actual value. So, there's a big difference where if someone's, if they have I don't know, several $1,000 grandfather clock and they don't want to get rid of that, that's a little different than, well, that's the wrapper from the chewing gum when I was in second grade. I'm trying to make something up. So, um, when we look at both, being like messy or disorganized is really different, than hoarding disorder. Someone who's disorganized can usually clean up if they choose to,
I know
without.
when I moved to Indiana, when Jen was starting with me, okay, there was a shed outside, and I had boxes in the shed. We were cleaning out the shed one day, and she asked me, she said, "Why are you holding on to curtains from my apartments in New York?" Okay, and number one, I was surprised because I didn't even know I had it. It
Were
was
they
probably thrown
pretty?
in a
No, I'm just
box, and
kidding.
they were regular like sheer curtains, but you know what? It was probably something put in a box when I moved, and the box was never reopened again.
Yeah.
And of course, I came up with that standard immediate line. Well, you never know, I might use them again.
Uh-huh. I
And
mean,
she
I do
looked
that.
at me,
Like,
and I
I
was
noticed
like,
myself doing that with like nails, nails or
Well,
screws,
I
things
do
like
that.
that.
Yeah, take
Yeah.
a look at my garage. We talked about that, but you know, the only difference was I joked when I said it, but I immediately was like, yeah, put it in the garage sale pile.
Yeah.
because I didn't need it. But there's a difference between, I think that was more disorganized than anything else. But there's a difference holding on to something and then realizing you got it and getting rid of it than that person that holds on to it, knows they have it, and doesn't want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we're looking at today. Now, many people have watched the TV shows about hoarding. I've watched a number of them. I still do if I see it on. In your opinion, do those shows accurately portray the disorder, or they sometimes create misconceptions?
Well, so those shows have helped to, increase public awareness about hoarding,
Mhm.
and show that it can, show the reality that can be a very serious safety and health concern. But they often focus on the most extreme situations, so so what we typically see on those shows is a very extensive examples of hoarding. So what viewers don't always see is that it exists on a spectrum. So hoarding really exists on a spectrum. There would be,
Right.
like a hoarding disorder that's mild and a hoarding disorder that's, extreme.
I'm just hoping that people listening, you talked about a grandfather clock, but let's go back. I know somewhere in my drawer, I have a Timex wristwatch. Okay, an old little Timex. That was mine as a kid. I
Hmm.
wore it for like 15 years. Okay, this Timex. Okay, it's in my drawer. I'm just not getting rid of it. Okay, that's different from collecting a whole bunch of stuff and just not getting rid of
Yeah.
things, because I don't want people to think, well, gosh, I got my mother's wedding gown, let's say, still
It's
sitting.
maybe a good way of saying it is, like it's normal for things to have sentimental value, to
Right,
have emotional value. Some of my most prized possessions are probably worth nothing to anyone else,
right.
you know? But if everything has that value, that's kind of
Right,
what hoarding
right.
disorder would look more like,
Mhm.
you know?
So why is it so emotionally difficult for someone with hoarding disorder to part with those possessions that they have little or no value to anybody else?
Well, I think that a lot of times, like you just said, the first thought is, well, I might need this someday, and then
Well,
or
I
if I
was
get
kidding.
rid of yeah, if I get rid of this, I'm going to lose an important memory, you know, making it makes getting rid of things feel emotionally painful rather than convenient. And that's
The one a moment thought that just came when you said that. My dad, okay, who's now in a nursing home,
Mhm.
but when he had the apartment that we grew up in, okay, he used to have behind his recliner in the living room. They had small room apartments and city, but from floor to ceiling, he had the cases of CDs. They come in that little plastic thing you
Yeah,
twist up. But I mean, almost floor to ceiling, blank ones.
yeah,
Okay. And he always used to say, "You sure you got enough CDs?
yeah.
You want me to send you another box or something like that?" I got a couple of them for the business. And he used to say, "Yeah, but you don't understand." And what he used to say was, when I was growing up and there was the Depression,
Mhm.
we didn't have anything.
Yeah,
So we didn't throw anything out. You guys think you're rich, you made the money, if you just throw it out if there's too many of them. There's still a lot of like the older people with that mentality of not
Mhm.
getting rid of that.
Yeah,
And that's a sad thing. I mean, the other day I was going through my drawers and I had old Street Smart discs. I used to
yeah,
back up everything just in case my computer's crashed or something, you know. And I mean, I had like 9 of those things. We're talking about some of the big ones too,
yeah,
full of these discs. And I literally said to myself, the heck am I doing with these? Okay, I've been retired now for like 3 or 4 years. Okay, I
yeah,
don't own the business. Most of these clients aren't even in business anymore, or, they have completely different websites. Why am I holding on to it?
yeah,
And I threw out. I mean, I had to take a second garbage can out to the curb on
yeah,
yesterday, okay, because there was so much inside of there But, you just can't hold on to stuff. I
Mhm.
mean, like you said, I know when I die, there's stuff that has meaning to me, but it's not going to have meaning to anybody else.
Yeah.
It's going to end up in the trash. And, what we'll talk about later, I think sometimes, just taking a picture of it is probably just as good,
Yeah.
holding on to the photo. So, now in hoarding disorder, usually it's about the objects themselves, or are those possessions often connected to deeper emotional issues, like grief, trauma, anxiety, or depression? Which
So
one?
the possessions, so a lot of times the possessions are only part of the story. That's just part of what we're seeing. So every person's experience is unique, but a lot of individuals with hoarding disorder also struggle with co-occurring conditions such as anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, and those belongings can become a way of coping with emotional pain, and basically given a sense of comfort. So the possessions can often feel like uh, provide a feeling of safety, during times that feel unpredictable or emotional. Or sorry, let me just
No,
redo that
no,
whole
that
question.
that's fine. No, one of the things that what I thought about there, which is interesting, watching those TV shows, they show a lot of like garbage, people just leaving stuff in the refrigerator. And
Yeah,
that they may have just answered the question because they never really went into that those people are dealing with a coexistent
yeah.
disorder as
No,
well.
it's not always that way. It's
Right.
not, it's, like you can have hoarding disorder in and of itself, but most often what we typically find is most mental health diagnoses co-occur. There,
Right.
it's much more common for someone to have multiple conditions that they're coping with than just a single one. Doesn't mean that we don't treat people with single disorders. I mean, we do that often, but it seems like most of the time, especially with, it depends on what disorder we're talking about, but substance use is usually a co-occurring disorder. Hoarding would usually be a co-occurring,
Yeah,
you know.
because I can see, I mean, I'm just remembering when show first came out, I used to watch it all the time when it
Yeah.
was on network TV. And, I can remember people saying, but that was my husband's, when he's not here anymore. He's
Yeah.
passed. And
Yep.
holding on to all of his clothes in his closet, and stuff. And I mean, me right away, sorry, Jen. Okay, I'd first contact the daughters, see if they want any of it. Whatever they don't want and stuff, and the clothes would go to Goodwill or
Yeah.
someplace like that. You know, there are certain things that are sentimental to hold on to, but certain objects just mean nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said earlier, it means something to you,
Yeah.
but I mean, I have a ton of that stuff. Just I'm looking around, I can pull stuff off the wall right now.
Yeah. Me
I mean,
too.
I have a drum head that's there that was painted from one of the first bands I was in. Name of the band was Fallacy with a PH. We can do a show on that too. But but the fact is that's been on my wall for
Yeah.
about 40 years.
Yeah.
Where now means nothing to anybody else other than the
But it means a
people that
lot
were
to
in that
you.
band. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And in fact,
that's the thing too, it's kind of like I'm trying to think how to say this, but think of like an exploitation of like our sentimental feeling, um, where basically it's kind of a thought that if I get like anything I get rid of is taking a part of me with it,
me away, right.
and so it's almost like I'm connected to all of these things and I need all of them to feel secure. And if any of them aren't around, whether I need them or not, I'm going to be uncomfortable. It's pretty wild. The thing with mental disorders that I really hope people understand is, if someone's believing something that's not true, for example, that's their reality. And I always say to students, like when I'm talking about paranoia or things, I ask the students this simple question. I say, who runs faster? A man who thinks he's being chased or a man who's being chased?
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
That's the reality to both of them.
But you see, reality too is what you make of the reality.
Yeah.
Because as I watched something last night, I believe it or not, and it said, "Did you ever notice if you buy a car, okay, and you buy a car you didn't really expect to buy, so you buy a Chrysler 300M, okay, and you buy it, and all of a sudden now you're on the road, and now you start seeing all these Chrysler 300Ms,
Yeah.
okay, it isn't that they just materialized, reality for them, but it's your perception of what your reality is.
Yeah.
And
And those items, they're attached to experiences. It
Mhm.
may just be, why here's the thing. Why does somebody buy a band t-shirt at a concert? When I
Right,
was playing in Paradox 44 and we sold t-shirts, like why did it was because they felt connected to they wanted this band as a part of me, and
right.
it's like basically can't turn that off kind of.
No. And and it makes a lot of sense. But so let me ask you, is there a point where when you're collecting or hoarding when it becomes a diagnosable mental health disorder? I mean, what point?
So really what you want to look for is when discarding things becomes a real point of distress, Um, so like if it leads to if collecting things leads to significant clutter that limits the normal use of living spaces,
Hmm.
um, which there's a difference between cluttered and, totally cluttered. Um, so when things reach a point, and we've seen, like extreme cases where there's the stacks of newspapers, I mean, just walls of newspapers or things like that, where that a person can't even live normally in their space because of that clutter. So that's really we what we look for is what is happening causing issues. That's really when it becomes a disorder.
There was a friend of mine, and I won't say his name, he's passed. Um, Most people, nobody ever really went into his home. He was, I divorced for years and stuff. Um, I went inside his house one day because I had to pick something up, and he invited me in. And the living room floor had stacks of magazines. I mean, stack next to stack next to stack next to stack. And I remember his quote was, "Watch step."
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay. I was taking it all in because, you see
Yeah.
the stuff on TV, but I was looking at it now, in front of me. And I knew the person really well. And when he gave me what he was supposed to give me, I said, I'm sorry, it's for all the friggin' magazines, And he said, well, no, there's articles in there that I keep, for his business and everything else. And it's like, well, wouldn't it be easier just to take those 2 pages out and
Yeah.
throw the rest of the magazine
Or
away?
scan them.
Yeah.
Scan them.
Well, he
Yeah,
wasn't
maybe not back.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, he wasn't very,
Technologically
yeah,
savvy.
thank you. Yeah. But he looked at me with this blank look on his face, and it's like, I would personally would do something like that, instead of having to watch, especially me in the middle of the night. I got to make sure I don't step on dogs when I get up.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to watch everywhere I go. So, if something gets that far that somebody else comes into your home and says something,
Yeah.
and listen to your spouse too. I mean, I know sometimes both men and women, listen to me, folks, both men and women. So you
Yep.
don't send me a text, okay, or write something, okay, can be, buttholes, okay, it's just, just to be annoying sometimes. But usually your spouse can say, why are you holding on to that?
Hmm. Yeah.
And they're not doing it for any other reason other than, I'm looking around this studio, this office that I'm sitting in here, and I've been talking about moving my office around, and changing, just layout. I think for my own brain, it's some. And
Yeah.
my wife's quote was, "Why don't you go through a couple of those drawer cabinets and get rid of some of that junk that's in there?" And of course, defense right away, your defense mechanism, which happens to them, okay, because so what junk? This isn't junk that's in
Yeah.
here. Yeah, it is. Okay, and over the next couple
Sorry,
of
you
days,
can't appreciate the value of these things.
no,
Yeah.
it's like, I when I owned the business, I owned a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
because I needed a lot of stuff. I don't own the business anymore. Okay, holding one thing, holding on to a scanner, that's no problem whatsoever. But when you go into the drawer and you have all these different kind of Avery forms, that's the only thing I can call them.
Yeah.
The
The
packages,
labels
T-shirt
and stuff.
transfers, right? Yeah, it's like, do you really need all of this stuff?
Yeah.
And if you do, it costs what, $6? Just buy another one, when you
Uh-huh.
need it, so you don't hold it for 4 years. And
Yeah.
yeah, I have a bunch of things like that I've made the decision that before I move the room around, I'm going to see if I can eliminate some furniture first.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's going to help tremendously with that too. So, does hoarding disorder, is that something that gradually develops over time, or can it appear, let's say, like after someone's death or some significant life event, as they say?
So it typically will develop gradually over time. Like mild saving behaviors, just saving some things here and there will typically develop, during adolescence or early adulthood, and then slowly worsen over time.
Mm-hmm.
So stressful life events, though, like the death of a loved one, financial hardship, trauma, those things can worsen symptoms, or even bring underlying difficulties to the surface. So it's kind of a combination of long-standing tendencies and stress that typically leads to severe overhoarding
I
or
just
hoarding.
basically talked about it like with Jen or with a spouse that's saying, clean this up. Okay.
Yeah.
Why can forcing someone to actually throw things away make the situation worse? Like
Well,
even like you see on those shows, it's like, when they're not looking, just throw the junk out, and you see them. There's people about an hour later climbing through the garbage pile
mhm.
to take stuff back.
Yeah. It's because the attachment, the issue isn't the object, it's the attachment to the object.
Mm-hmm.
So um a lot of times, even though family members have good intentions, you know, simply pushing the person to get rid of something, it isn't going to solve the underlying issue.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing to keep in mind.
And it's
It
going to
doesn't mean
cause
you can't
more.
address it. It's just
Right.
address it with love.
But that's the thing too. If they have a problem, okay, you should leave a professional to approach it with, like, I'm thinking again, the TV shows. You see that on the TV show where
Yeah.
they bring in, at least a lot of them, they brought in a psychologist or psychotherapist to sit with them before
Yeah.
you even go through that trauma of,
Hmm.
saying, okay, now it's time to cleanse some of this stuff. You got to go through first, and you have to prepare, make sure the person understands their
Yeah.
disorder and learns how to cope with the disorder before you immediately throw all that trauma on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's like, someone who, almost died in a boating accident, and just said, no, come on, get out of the boat, just go.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We're just, get over that. No, it's not that easy to get over, after that. So, I don't think people think of it still as a disorder. I
Yeah.
think people just think of it as, oh, come on, get past that already,
Yeah.
and not realize how serious that is. Um, Now, someone with a hoarding disorder, do they usually recognize they have a problem, or do they think nothing's really wrong?
It really depends on the person. I mean, it kind of varies, Some people fully recognize that it's a problem and desperately want help, but feel overwhelmed on where to begin. Others have limited awareness of, and basically may not see the clutter as a problem, even if others living with them do.
Yeah,
So,
because I think there's some episodes of that where the
yeah,
husband's like, I've had it. Okay, I'm
yeah,
tired of not even being able to use, you know, the living room or the bedroom anymore. I gotta climb over stuff to get into the bed and then push some piles to the side.
yeah,
You don't want to get up into the bed, and we as lay people look at that and say, how the heck, like I did
yeah,
with the living room, how could you get around those piles of magazines, like that? But when you start to look back at it and you think it's a disorder, person's having. You don't make fun of someone who has to use a cane to walk around the house.
Yeah.
It's a problem that they're dealing with. What are some of the biggest risks that's associated with severe hoarding beyond the clutter itself?
Well, so it can increase the risk of falls, hazards, blocked exits for emergencies, structural damage to the home, poor sanitation, pests, mold. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can come from that. And it can even have like profound emotional and social consequences where people become isolated, due to embarrassment, and stop interacting outside of the house. It can even significantly affect a person's overall quality of life, which is why early intervention is important. If we're noticing that there's an unhealthy attachment to items, now is the time to address it. Don't wait. Look into it. And worst case scenario, you find out it's in fact not a problem.
It's the lightning round. Education version.
Well, here it is again. It's time for, yes, the educational lightning round. Now, this time we're going to do something a little different, like Monty Python would say there. Okay, fact or fiction. Dr. Davis, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out some statements and let you tell us whether they're fact or fiction,
Okay.
or and why for some of them.
All
Okay,
right.
there's 10 of those. Number one, most people with hoarding disorder are simply lazy.
Fiction.
Yeah, that's what I'd say too. Okay, someone with hoarding disorder, even if their home doesn't look like the extreme cases I've seen on TV, they could be with a hoarding disorder.
True.
Yep. Now, hoarding disorder is the same thing as collecting.
False.
Yeah. Now, many people with hoarding disorder experience significant anxiety when asked to throw something away.
True.
Simply cleaning out someone's home without their involvement usually solves the problem.
False.
I only imagine to come home. Where
Oh,
is
yeah.
it all? Okay?
Yep.
Heart attack city. Trauma, grief, or major life changes can sometimes contribute to a hoarding disorder.
True.
Now, children can develop hoarding behaviors, even though the disorder is usually diagnosed later in life.
True.
Now, people with hoarding disorder don't care about how their homes look.
False.
Yeah. Now, number 9, treatment can help people with hoarding disorder improve their quality of life.
True.
And the
Absolutely.
best thing family members can do is shame or pressure the person into cleaning everything immediately.
False.
Okay, so now we're gonna continue that a little further
All right.
with the thing that's called one-word answers. Okay, I have a blank page in between there. So, okay, first word that comes to mind when you hear hoarding disorder.
Overwhelming.
The biggest misconception.
Laziness.
The hardest emotion.
Anxiety.
The most misunderstood behavior.
Saving or hoarding.
The greatest challenges for families.
Patience.
Now, one thing not to say.
Like just clean it up, or like just anything.
Yeah.
And why can't you just make it better?
Now, one thing that they should say.
How? Like, how can I help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How can I support you in
How
this?
did it get that way? How can I
Yeah.
help? Yeah. Recovery.
Totally possible.
Yep. Hope.
Yes, absolutely.
See, and I think what people have to realize is that, hoarding disorder is something that can be treated.
Mm-hmm.
You see on a lot of those shows that can be taken care of. It's not something that just happens overnight. We don't take them in the back room with a baseball bat, and solve the problem. Okay. But it is a mental disorder. And
Yeah.
it's the reason why we do the show. It's not to sensationalize anything.
No.
It's, to help you educate. So I got a final 4 or 5 questions here.
Okay.
What treatments have been shown to help people with hoarding disorder? And as we said, recovery is possible. So what treatments do we use?
The treatment with the strongest support behind it is cognitive behavioral therapy, that is specifically designed for hoarding disorder. So treatment will typically focus on improving decision-making skills, reducing avoidance, gradually practicing discarding possessions and addressing the thoughts and emotions that drive that behavior. So it really, what therapy does is, really look into the underlying issues more so because hoarding is really a symptom of an underlying issue.
Right.
Um, so in some cases, we may refer to a medical doctor or prescriber because there could be medication that could help. But just for people to understand, recovery is absolutely possible. Absolutely.
So what's the biggest myth that people believe about hoarding disorder?
I think that people choose to live that way, like that they're actively choosing, with basically that they have the ability to make that choice, what's the word whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Just
we talked about, the last 2 or 3 episodes, we talked about the overweight person in Walmart that we saw on a scooter,
Mhm.
and we look at that, they choose to be that weight.
Yeah, it's not, that's
And
not
it's not the
always the
case,
case.
right? Yeah, and majority of
Same
the
with,
cases,
yeah.
it's not. There's an underlying issue.
I mean, if you think about it, like here's the thing. If you really think about a person who, is hoarding, just because they're struggling with hoarding doesn't mean they don't love their family, their home,
Uh-huh.
their life, all those things. And they would, if they had a choice, I'm sure they would be actively choosing to live another way. When it comes to a disorder, they may not have the ability to do that without help. And
Right.
that's really important for family members to understand.
It's like a drug addiction.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
is.
they don't want to do it, but they don't know, they don't have the coping skills to
Yeah.
not do it. So what do you say to someone who has a family member with a hoarding disorder and that person's beginning to lose patience?
Well, so the first thing you want to do is acknowledge that your frustration is understandable.
Mhm.
Like you were allowed to be frustrated because hoarding affects everyone that lives in the environment, and it can be emotionally exhausting for everybody. At the same time, we need to remember that that person isn't intentionally doing that to make our life uncomfortable. It's something that they're struggling with, and we're being affected by it. True, but they're not doing that specifically to us. And I think a lot of times, substance abuse is a great example where it sounds weird when I say this, but to some degree, that person's using has nothing at all to do with anybody else. You know what I
Right.
mean? It is not like, well, I really, yeah, I'm sort of maybe thinking about you. Well, I'm definitely going to use. It'll make everybody mad. Like it doesn't
Right.
work
Yeah,
that
that
way, you know?
the last thing that someone who's using is thinking about.
Yeah. And that's why they try to hide it because they're trying to, like meet that unhealthy need, but they don't want it to affect others. And if they could do it without it affecting others, they probably would. But the
Now, what
reason that
about
most of us stop is because of how it affects others.
what about children? I mean, children of someone that's hoarding. Is this something that, because now they start seeing it as a norm for a long time, that they're going to end up starting to
Mhm.
do that?
I don't know that it could necessarily, I don't think that it would be like contagious per se,
Right.
like
Yeah.
um but it definitely could shape what a person sees as normal. It's just like coming from an abusive home
I
or
was just going to say, yeah, because if they're used to seeing abuse,
yeah.
they're liable to carry that abuse on.
Yeah.
It's not that they catch it, it's what they see as the
So
norm.
it may make someone, a little more susceptible just because if they believe that that's, that you don't throw things away, you keep things, but I think of it, I would typically think it would have the opposite effect, because a lot of time, not always, but a lot of times family members, will like if they grow up with someone who's struggling with alcohol use, they won't ever drink because they're scared to death of
Mhm.
the same thing happening to them or something.
See, now I grew up we were talking before we went on the about a small apartment
Hmm.
that was living in. Of course, everything was all over the place. Okay, because four of us in this little small place. And I was always, there was stuff everywhere all the time. And it wasn't cluttered or, hoarding. It just no place to put everything that was there.
Yeah.
And I find myself today, we've had this conversation last night with my wife, where she's like, "Why did you move my papers from the counter here?" It's like, because I use the counter.
Yeah.
Okay. Plus, if somebody would come into the house, first thing I don't want them to see is papers and stuff ever.
Yeah.
That's from back then. And I even said that to her last night. I was like, you got to understand, I grew up with stuff everywhere. I like just walking into a room and things being
Yeah.
fairly neat and in its place. I'm not one of those compulsive people that's got to be here, but I like walking into a room and it being neat and clean.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the way it is. Now, if someone watching today believes that they or even someone they love may be struggling with hoarding disorder, what first step would you encourage them to take?
I would, first just talk to the express your concerns in a loving, caring, supportive way. Don't attack the person, but, talk to them and like, is this something that do they see this as an issue? Is it, but you want to approach it with kid gloves, so to speak, in the very beginning.
Right.
That's the
most
first
people
thing
are going, do you really need that? That's not talking to the person, that's talking at a person.
And obviously if there is a question of whether or not this is a problem, one of the best things you can do is reach out to a professional and find out for sure, investigate it, look into it and see, like I said, even if you find out, hey, you know what, this isn't, and we thought this might be something, it's not awesome. That would be worth a visit, I think.
Yep. Err on the side of safety.
Absolutely. Always err on the side of safety.
So my last question, if there's one thing you hope every viewer remembers after watching this evening's episode, what would it be?
Behind every pile of possessions is a person, not a problem. Like that, we need to understand that, people deal with things, and what someone is dealing with does not define who they are. Like there are medical doctors that struggle with hoarding. There are, any walk of life. I mean, these are things that people don't ask for. It's kind of just the luck of the draw, so to speak.
Exactly.
But if you're like me, if you're a person that, I'm a person that has embraced my mental health, conditions, and, it doesn't have to be the end. Like none of these things are a death sentence. It is all treatable. There is hope and things can get better.
When they ask why we do this, and again, even somebody in one of the doctor's offices, the nurse, asked me why we do this. I say because it's hope to break that stigma of mental health. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a misfit from society because you have an issue that you need to deal with. And that's why we use, like say in the Waypost commercial, you have to make that first call. Err on the side of safety. Like you said, if you're not sure and people say stuff, just check it out.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt. So I think one of the biggest lessons from today's conversation, that's easy to judge what we don't understand.
It really is. When we slow down and learn what's happening beneath the surface, we often replace judgment with empathy. And that's where healing truly begins.
We hope today's episode encouraged you to look beyond the clutter and see the person that's there.
And remember, no matter what mental health challenges somebody is facing, hope is real, treatment it can help, and no one has to walk that journey alone.
Now, please, if you enjoyed today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe, share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget our website too at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information on our show, merchandise, contact information, and even how to apply to be a guest on our show.
And if you or someone you know is struggling, please don't wait to seek help. Healing begins with one simple conversation.
And remember that 988 number. You can text or call anytime. So I'm going to go back, where everything comes into full circle. At the beginning of today's episode, we asked you to imagine having 30 seconds to save one possession in your home. Now, I hope after today's conversation, you'll remember that the most valuable thing in that house was never the possessions. It's always been the people that are living there.
And that's exactly why understanding mental health is so important.
Now, remember, if tonight's conversation gave you new perspective, we hope you share it with someone who might need to hear us. So God bless you, and we hope to see you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share the episode so more people can be part of these important conversations around mental health. And remember, your life matters. We hope to see you again next week.